When the first Filipino immigrants to the U.S. arrived, they faced discrimination, hardship, and rejection by the dominant white culture. Filipino migration to the United States began in the early 20th century, with many Filipinos working as agricultural laborers in California. In Watsonville, Filipino migrants mainly work in the agricultural industry, picking crops such as lettuce and strawberries. However, white Americans began to view the Filipinos as a threat to their jobs due to their willingness to work for lower wages. In the late 1920s, the economic situation in Watsonville worsened due to the Great Depression. This led to increased competition between the Filipino migrant workers and the white residents for jobs, which further fueled racial tensions. Many of these workers were brought over by labor contractors who promised them better wages and living conditions than they could find in their home countries. However, these promises were often not kept, and Filipino workers were subjected to low wages, poor working conditions, and discrimination from both their employers and the broader society. They were also excluded from most social and cultural events and were subject to racist taunts and violence from local residents. These factors created a climate of frustration and anger among the Filipino community of Watsonville and other California towns. In the days leading up to the riot, tensions boiled over when a Filipino man was beaten by a group of white men at a local dance hall. This incident, along with others like it, fueled a sense of resentment among the Filipino workers. The incident, which came to be known as the Watsonville Riot, resulted in the deaths of 2 Filipinos and the hospitalization of dozens more. On the evening of January 22nd, a Filipino dance was held at the Filipino Hall in Watsonville. The event attracted a large crowd of around 300 Filipino migrant workers who were celebrating the end of the lettuce season. A group of Filipinos gathered in the dance hall to discuss the recent incidents of violence and discrimination. As the meeting progressed, a group of white men arrived and began taunting the Filipinos, calling them racial slurs and challenging them to a fight. The Filipinos initially tried to ignore the taunts, but the situation soon escalated into a full-blown riot. The two groups began throwing rocks and bottles at each other, and the fighting quickly spread to other parts of the town. The police were eventually called in to break up the riot, but their presence only served to further inflame the situation. Some officers were seen siding with the white attackers, and several Filipino workers were beaten and arrested by the police. By the time the riot had ended, 2 Filipinos were dead and dozens more were injured. The incident received widespread attention in the national media and sparked a larger debate about the treatment of Filipino workers in the United States. In the aftermath of the riot, several Filipino leaders called for better working conditions and an end to the discriminatory practices against their community. Overall, the Watsonville Riot was a tragic and violent event that highlighted the struggles faced by Filipino workers in the United States during the early 20th century. While the incident led to some positive changes in the treatment of Filipino workers, it also served as a reminder of the ongoing challenges faced by minority communities in America. Aftermath. The Watsonville Riot had a significant impact on the Filipino migrant worker community, as many were forced to flee the area due to the violence and discrimination they faced. The incident also sparked a national debate about the treatment of Filipino migrant workers in the United States. In response to the riot, Filipino American organizations and civil rights groups called for greater protection of migrant workers and an end to racial discrimination. The incident also led to the creation of the Filipino Labor Union, which aimed to improve the working conditions and rights of the Filipino workers in California. Conclusion. The Watsonville Riot was a tragic event that highlights the deep-seated racial tension and economic competition that existed in California during the early 20th century. The incident underscores the importance of protecting the rights of marginalized groups and promoting diversity and inclusion in society. Recently, Watsonville's mayor issued an apology to the Filipino community for the riot. I'm hoping that this video will give you a better understanding of the struggles that our ancestors faced in order to improve life for Filipino Americans. Please support this channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Thank you.